Okay, let's start. I don't know how this lecture is going to be. It's bad enough to give lectures when you're well prepared. And now this is at short notice. I'm doing this because the scheduled speaker for this slot, Professor Punita Batra, couldn't make it because of the train derailment last night. So we'll see how it how it goes. So she might have talked about something else, but I will talk about. So the title is Affine Algebras as central extensions of loop groups. Okay, now we are going into entirely new territory here. Okay, so far all the lectures you've had are from Humphreys's book and about the theory of complex semisimple Lie algebras and their representation theory, which you have just started to learn, and there will be more about representation theory and about Chevalley groups, etc. in this week and next. Okay, but this is the other theme in the school, namely that of affine algebras. Okay, so there is there are algebras which go by the name of Kac-Moody algebras. Okay. So for example, the standard reference on this for Kac-Moody algebras is Katz's book on the same Katz, which whose name appears in the title in that name of the Lie algebras. He calls it infinite dimensional Lie algebras. Probably he doesn't call them Kac-Moody Lie algebras, but they're called Kac-Moody Lie algebras. What they are it would be Vishwanath is here, so I'm safe. I can say things out aloud and he'll correct me if I'm wrong. So these are infinite dimensional analogues of complex semisimple Lie algebras. So the structure theory that we learn for complex semisimple Lie algebras themselves, like for example root space decomposition, roots, while group, etc., and the representation theory of these algebras, which you've just started learning, and famous formulas such as the Weil character formula, have analogues. Both the structure theory and the representation theory have have analogues here. Okay, and you can recover this complex semisimple Lie algebras as precisely those Kac-Moody algebras that are finite dimensional. Is that, yeah, okay. Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, and so this book is about the theory of this more general theory. So technically speaking, you could just study, not even study Humphreys and study this book. Okay, and you will be covering Humphreys on the way. Okay, as a very special case, but that's not how things work in practice. So we are doing Humphreys and then sort of graduating to this book. But among these, what I wanted to say was, okay, so for the first 5 chapters of this book, for example, and later chapters too, are develop the theory of this algebras in an abstract setting. Okay, so it's an abstract, very correct, rigorous, mathematically complete theory. Okay, but I for one, I mean, I have tried to study it several times, but it just, I mean, without success. Okay, there is, however, a poor man's introduction to Kac-Moody-Lie algebras, which I would like to give you, and that is this so-called affine algebras. So there are, among these Kac-Moody algebras are certain special class called affine algebras. So one thing you will see today is that you will hear a lot of words: affine algebra, loop algebra, central extension, etc., which you might not have seen. Okay, so we'll get comfortable with these terms as we go along. Okay, so I'll now write down the first line in Katz's book, chapter 7. It says that this gives a concrete construction of all non-twisted affine algebras. So in particular, affine algebras, and among them are non-twisted affine algebras, whatever they might mean. So the point I want to make here is there is this interesting generalization of the theory of complex semisimple Lie algebras, but rather than worry about the entire generalization, we'll look at this special case. Okay? And what we will do is a concrete construction. Katz puts the book puts it within quotes, but I'm not going to put it because it is really concrete. Okay, I don't know why he does it within quotes. Concrete construction of non-twisted affine algebras. So you see in this morning in Sripad's lecture, you saw that starting from the Dynkin diagram or the Cartan matrix associated to a reduced root system, you could construct the corresponding complex simple algebra or complex semisimple algebra, and if the root system is irreducible, then the corresponding simple algebra. Okay, now so I read this line in McDonald's. So by the way, there is all this started with the work of MacDonald on something called McDonald's eta identities, which Vishwanath will talk about later. Okay. That was one of the motivations for the development of this theory, and MacDonald himself has some introductory notes to Kac-Moody algebras, which are a good read. There he makes the following comment. It's not often in mathematics that you take some interesting, beautiful theory and try to weaken the hypothesis and hope to get anything at all. Okay, if you try to do that, most people will frown at you, and with good reason. Okay, but there are a few occasions when it is actually successful, and this is one of them. Okay, so what you do is you take that same construction that you did in the morning, and instead of taking the Cartan matrix of the root system, that's what you used, you just assume that you weaken the condition. Instead of it being positive positive definite matrix, you can assume that it is more general than that, called a generalized Cartan matrix. Never mind what that is, but you can weaken the hypothesis and go through the motions, and lo and behold, you get something very interesting, and that's the Kac-Moody algebra. Okay, so if you but that construction is done, that is the formal construction that is done in the first few chapters of the book, and that's how perhaps Punita will talk about. I don't know exactly the plan of her lectures, but I expect that she will talk about this. I mean, it's a little bit of it's a bit technical, so even she might, 4 lectures is a short time, so even she might decide to take do only a special case or do something else. But whatever it is that she does, we will definitely today not worry about the general theory at all. We are going to look at the concrete construction of non-twisted affine algebras. Okay, so this particular special case can be understood in other terms, in more concrete terms, in entirely not by using say defining generators and relations using Serre relations as we saw in the morning, but by entirely other means, and that's what we will do. So okay, so that's what chapter 7 is about. Okay, and you will see what you should notice is, we'll make some definitions, we'll define roots, we will define simple roots. Okay, instead of worrying about choosing a Cartan, which you haven't done yet, but or maybe you have. So in the semi-simple case, you were given the algebra, and then you chose a Cartan subalgebra, and then you went about doing it. Here what we will do instead is, I'll give you the Cartan, take that Cartan subalgebra as given, I'll write down the root space decomposition. You will see that there will be a positive roots, there will be simple roots, and several other things. And you can play the same game that you most of the time, or analogous game at least, as you do in the finite dimensional case, in this case as well, and you will see that it is just as beautiful and well worth the time. Okay, okay, so off we go. So the most important thing to notice, so what goes into making a non-twisted affine algebra? Okay, how do you build one? With every non-twisted affine algebra, there is an underlying finite dimensional algebra, simple algebra. Okay, that's the first input. So I'll write that. There is a, so to every, by the way, another pleasant thing is the following. For many applications, I am told that in fact for any known application, it is only the theory of affine algebras that really matters. And among them, if you understand the non-twisted affine algebras, that's a big class. The twisted ones are a little more technical, and we will not worry about them in this course for want of time. But if I hazard the guess that if one understood non-twisted affines well, then the passage to twisted would be just wouldn't be that difficult. Okay. So again, we are in a happy situation. Not only is this concrete construction circumventing or subverting the need for a to understand some general stuff, for as far as applications are concerned, it is really the most important case. Okay, so that's a very good situation to be in. So there is to every non-twisted. Okay, I'll write boldly, let G be a non-twisted affine algebra. Okay, so whatever it is, let's denote it by G, and it has an underlying finite dimensional complex simple algebra let's denote that G with a dot on top. Okay, so in this theory you will see dots on the top mean there is for the underlying simple versions. Okay, and without the dots would mean the more the infinite dimensional algebra itself. Okay, so then what is true is, let me write down something that is a true statement. So you take this is a Lie algebra. Okay, so we know what this means. This is the derived algebra of that Lie algebra. This will be, and again these words I'll explain after writing them down, universal central extension. If you want the universal central extension of the Lie algebra of polynomial maps from C star, the C minus the units of the units the invertible complex numbers 2G to G naught. So whatever this is, we will construct it. Its derived algebra will be the universal central extension of the Lie algebra of polynomial maps from C star to G. This G, the underlying finite. Okay, let's understand this step by step. So first we have to understand what polynomial maps from here to here mean. Okay, now this is a finite dimensional vector space, and this is if you know a little bit about varieties, this is an affine variety, and so you can take that to be polynomial maps with values here, which makes sense. But if you don't like that, you can just take the following definition, and that's very so. What this generally, if you take maps to some place, say maps to a ring, form a ring themselves, right? So here maps to a Lie algebra will naturally form a Lie algebra. Okay, so it has a natural structure of a Lie algebra. But if you don't like that description, here is a more algebraic description of this, of the first step, the Lie algebra of polynomial maps. What that is so here is this. So the Lie algebra of polynomial maps from this is all tensors are over complex numbers. Okay, so this is a general fact. If you take an affine variety, if you want to find out functions with values in a vector space, you just tensor that vector space with the ring of functions of that affine variety. Okay, but CTT inverse is the ring of functions on this, and you tensor it with this vector space. G, thanks. Okay, but never mind that. If you don't want to think like that, you can just take that as G dot is a complex simple algebra. You just extend scalars to, you let scalars be not just complex numbers, but now Laurent polynomials. Okay, and then just this trivial extension, the structure by just extending the scalars, that gives you this Lie algebra. Now okay, I will come to this central extension in a minute, but before that I want to say a few other things which might make it more so finishing up on what Kart says in his introduction. So there are something called current algebras, and he says the corresponding current algebras play an important role in quantum field theory, whatever that means. Okay, so surely there are many applications to very many different areas, of these algebras, particularly to physics and to number theory. These are the two areas where the applications have appeared. Not to mention that it throws more light on even the finite dimensional theory itself. Okay, so we are in the process of looking up what a central extension is. So, okay, maybe I'll come to that in a minute. Okay, so for a minute, let's work with this one. Okay, so let's call L. This is Katz's notation. This is Laurent polynomial ring. So if I take a general, so I'll make some observations. Okay, so there is a if you see this subject itself, and in this lecture in particular, there is a lot of formal stuff. If you're good with formally manipulating symbols, what they mean, what they might mean, and then you like what's going on, because there is lots of power series, formal power series that you play around with. So let's take a general element. So of this, so let's denote it P, and so if I write that as CKT to the K, then let's call residue at P, from analogy with something that you know from somewhere else, is the coefficient of t to the minus 1. Okay, that's the definition. That's just a definition. Okay. Now note that the residue function, is a linear functional. And it is defined by the following properties. Residue of T inverse is equal to 1, and residue, and this is a very strange way of writing it, residue of any other power of T is 0, but instead of writing it that way, I'll write like this. If something is derived, you can't get T to the minus 1 there, and therefore let me write it like that for all P. So now we are working towards the central extensions. Okay. With central extensions, there are attached things called cocycles, two cocycles. And what I'm going to write down is some example of a cocycle. Okay. So the word might suggest to you that there is the cocycles, coboundaries, etc. occur in some cohomology theory, and indeed it is the these will be cocycles, two cocycles with values in the trivial representation, if you know what that means. But you don't have to know anything about that theory at all to understand. You can write these down explicitly what they mean and manipulate them. So you don't need to know anything about the cohomology of Lie algebras to understand this. Rather, you can use this as a means to understand, as a stepping stone to that if you want. Okay, so I'll set. So this is an example, a certain example of a two cocycle, not quite of Lie algebras, but it has a similar property. Okay, so let me define PQ to be res of d p by dt times q. That's my definition. So this is now a bilinear form. So phi is a bilinear form. So what is it, a bilinear form? Right, I've taken two Laurent polynomials associated to the pair a complex number. Okay. Now, this is linear in P because derivative is linear, multiplication by Q is linear, residue is a linear functional, and linear in Q, right. So, it is a bilinear form. Okay. Now, notice that it has the following property. By combining that with that property here, this property and the Leibniz rule tells me that this phi pq is antisymmetric. Okay. So, phi pq is equal to plus phi qp equal to 0, and the proof is easy because I have to just say res of dp t by dq plus res of dq is equal to res of d by dt of pq, but that we observed was 0. Okay. No, these are Laurent polynomials. These are Laurent polynomials, meaning this is okay. So this definition is ck equal to 0 except for finitely many k. That's the definition of this ring. Okay, and notice another property. This is, so these are the two properties of cocycles. One is that they are antisymmetric. They are functions from the, so in this case we have taken CTT inverse, but soon we are going to work over Lie algebras. So it is a bilinear form on a Lie algebra which has the property that it is antisymmetric, and and I will write down this property, and there will be an analogous property for Lie algebras, and this one is phi of PQR plus phi of, you cyclically permute these, QRP plus phi of RPQ equal to 0. I will not prove this, but you can check it. Okay. So these are the two. So what we will write down therefore, what is now, I will tell you what a 2 cocycle is for a Lie algebra. It is, instead of this CTT inverse, you take it's a bilinear form on a Lie algebra which is antisymmetric and which has this property where this multiplication now is the Lie bracket. That's the definition. We'll write it down in a minute. Okay. And the reason why we are interested in it for our present context is that they are linked up with universal central extensions in the sense that I will define. Okay. Okay. Now, before I do that, I want to do something else, and give you a little more idea about the relation between the general theory. Okay. So what did we say? We said that, so there are certain algebras called Kac-Moody algebras which you can associate to what are called generalized Cartan matrices. So without the generalized, you've seen what a Cartan matrix is, and if you take a Cartan matrix and form this procedure, what you get precisely is a complex semisimple Lie algebra. Okay. But if you do this with a slightly more general hypothesis, namely generalized Cartan matrices, you will get this. Okay. Now here on this side, so we are talking about a particular case here, namely untwisted affine Lie algebras. That's a special class of these, an important special class, as we mentioned. And what are the corresponding generalized Cartan matrices? Well, what we said was the untwisted affine with every untwisted affine Lie algebra, there is an underlying simple Lie algebra which has a Cartan matrix. So somehow the generalized Cartan matrix for the untwisted affine must be cooked up out of the underlying Cartan matrix of the simple in some canonical fashion, in some standard fashion, and that's what we are going to do. What it is the so-called extended Cartan matrix of the underlying simple Lie algebra, or okay, maybe I should say semi-simple here, but I'll assume that my Cartan matrices are irreducible. So how do you attach extended Cartan? No, how do you make it bigger? Given a Cartan matrix of a complex simple algebra, how do you make it bigger and make it, what does it mean to say extended Cartan matrix? So I want to give this in the classical cases so that you can start doing some work, and that will also help get used to some of the notation that is used in the construction of the untwisted affine. Okay, so let us do this pleasant calculation, and it looks very nice. So here are the extended Dynkin diagrams. So the word extended will be applied to Cartan matrices, will be applied to Dynkin diagrams, etc. Okay, so I'll write extended Dynkin diagrams. Of classical Lie algebras. So let us take the type AL and write down its Dynkin diagram. So I'll write L of them, right? And in the notation that was introduced, I don't know if it was I've forgotten who introduced it, but so I'll write n is equal to L plus 1. Okay. So AL corresponds to the corresponding simple Lie algebra is SLN. So this is epsilon n minus 2 minus n minus 1. This is epsilon n minus 1 minus n. So I'll go back and forth between n and L. Use whichever is more convenient. Okay. So that's the. Okay, so I don't know if the height of a root has been introduced. So let's see. So you take a root. In this case, what are the roots? So if you remember the picture, roots are the common eigen values for the for the Lie algebra itself. You choose a Cartan subalgebra. In this case, it's the diagonal matrices, traceless, and decompose the algebra into common eigenvectors under the adjoint action for these. Okay, and those you see are the EIJs. Those are the elements, and EIJ will correspond to the eigenvalue, common eigenvalue epsilon I minus epsilon j. So the roots are epsilon I minus epsilon j. Okay. Okay, so what is the height of a root? So you take a root and it can be written as a sum of simple roots, okay, in a unique way, because the simple roots form a basis for the space of H star. So root is equal to C, so let me write C1 alpha 1 plus CL alpha L, alpha 1 alpha L are simple roots. Yeah, you can define height of a root. Let me define height of a root, and then we are actually worried about heights of positive roots. So the height of this root is the most obvious definition. You just take the sum of the c's. Okay, and let me mention a fact. There exists a unique root which has to necessarily be positive with max height. These are the alpha 1 up to alpha L in this case. Yes, indeed. So this is a fact. Okay, we will not worry about proving that, it's true. So the question is, what is this one? Which one should it be? Well, it's you look at this, and you want to take a guess which one it should be. It's the most positive. So positive roots are on top. So the most positive is the one which is on that end, epsilon 1 minus epsilon. So this is epsilon 1 minus epsilon n in this case. So here it is. So let's call this theta. There exists a unique root, I call that theta. Okay, theta in this case is epsilon 1 minus epsilon n. Okay, now I introduce, I mean, you might ask why. In a moment you will see why it's a beautiful thing to do it, but I will so I will take minus theta here, and that's, I put a node for minus theta. Okay, and minus theta is, of course, in our case, epsilon n minus epsilon 1. Right? Now I try to put it into the diagram and extend the diagram in the same fashion. I take inner products and see if it's orthogonal. I will not write a line. If it is if that cos whatever it was, cos square was something, then you draw lines and put numbers on them according to what happens. So tell me to which of these this is connected. So if I take epsilon n minus epsilon 1, I have to take inner products with the other stuff. So there is an n and there is a 1, and remember epsilon 1 and epsilon up to epsilon n are just the standard basis vectors. The advantage of doing this in this notation is that you can pretend that you are doing this in, not just pretend, you can actually do this in the standard in Rn. Yeah. So this is the standard inner product on these unit vectors epsilon 1 through epsilon n. So epsilon 1 with the other epsilon i's is 0, epsilon n with anything other than epsilon n is 0. So the only things that they could contribute are possibly here and here. And what do I get here? I get minus 1. Here again I get minus 1, which means the angle between them is no. No, but they are lengths. Remember their lengths. See, so what is this? What is the angle between these two? See, it cannot be pi, because see, there are the only root which is in the same direction as another root is its negative. So that cannot be. Okay. See, these two are, what is the angle between these two? Pi over 3. If it is minus 1 and they have the same length, it is pi over 3. sorry, 2 pi by 3, 2 pi by 3, 2 pi by 120, that's it, 120 degrees, right? So that is the extended diagram, okay? And let's do it for B, C, D. It's a very pleasant exercise to do it. So I don't know if you're by now used to these root systems. So this is epsilon 1 minus epsilon 2, epsilon 2 minus epsilon 3. It sort of starts out the same way and goes up to epsilon L minus 1 minus epsilon L, and then there is an epsilon L. And this is longer, so you put this. This is how BL looks. Okay, and okay, I wish I could tell you how to think about this in a certain point of view. If you do think about this, it's easy to see that the highest root here is again, if you choose the form correctly, it's again the uppermost element, okay, which maybe I'll write this down as a tutorial. You have to do this not with the standard inner product, but with a slightly correctly chosen inner product. Okay. So this one will be epsilon 1 plus epsilon 2. So minus theta, so let me write it here, is minus epsilon 1 minus epsilon 2. And the only thing that it has non-zero inner product with is, well, you could try this, but it gives you 0. This is the only one. And what kind of a bond should I write? They have the same length, both are root 2 in length, right? Because these are standard basis vectors in a certain Euclidean space, and the inner product is minus 1, so I have to write a single bond. That's how the extended thing looks. Okay, so let me do CL and DL as well. Somehow these, okay, so you write this, I'll come to that in a minute. Let me finish CL and DL. So let's do CL. So once again, you start out the same way. This is epsilon L minus 1 minus epsilon L. And this is 2 epsilon L. And this is long, so this is length 2, this is length root 2. So you write this way. Okay, and again, like I said, it's in the correct, if you choose the correct form, the Cartan subalgebra will be on the diagonal, and the positive roots will be the upper half, and the most positive one will be that corner, the north and east corner, okay, which will turn out to be 2 epsilon 1. So I'll write 2 epsilon 1 here. So theta is 2 epsilon 1. So, and I write 2 epsilon 1 here because I know how it's going to. So if I try 2 epsilon 1, so this is, sorry, I should write minus theta. So minus theta is minus 2 epsilon 1, and let's see, it's with 0 with all these. The only thing it gives is with this, and it's a minus 2. It's kind of like this. So I should write a double bond, and since this is longer, I'll write like that. So that's the extended diagram for the type C. Okay, and finally for type D, this is type D, and you write epsilon 1 minus epsilon 2, epsilon 2 minus epsilon 3. This is epsilon L minus 2 minus epsilon L minus 1, and actually this is, see, you write as if this is a certain just for AN, but this one is epsilon L minus 1 plus epsilon L. And theta in this case is epsilon 1 plus epsilon 2. And so I choose a node here for this and see for which one it gives a non-zero inner product with, and you see that these have neither 1 nor 2. This has 1 and 2, but the signs are such that you don't get anything. This is the only one it has any inner product with, and that is minus 1. And since this have the same length, that's, I mean, it's better to write it, I mean, I should write it, it's better to write it like this. Okay, so these are the extended Dynkin diagrams of the corresponding simple algebras. So now let's write the extended Cartan matrices. Okay, so the extended Cartan matrices. So they now from this diagram, the Cartan matrix is constructed in the same way as that 2 alpha I alpha j by alpha j. That whatever that is, you write the same thing. So let us write it for example. So the point I want to make is, whatever Punita is going to do tomorrow, day after, etc., she will start with a generalized Cartan matrix and construct an algebra like how Shripad did this morning by taking generators and relations. And the point I am trying to make is that if you choose for the generalized Cartan matrix, the extended Cartan matrix associated to a simple Lie algebra, which you do by this procedure. Okay, you take theta, highest root, write it as a sum of simple roots, take minus theta and use that as a node and write this diagram and then produce the matrix and follow the procedure. What you get is the untwisted affine algebra. Okay. And the next point I'm going to make is that even if you don't understand this morning's procedure or whatever Punita is going to do, the other description that I'm going to give of, that is the concrete description, which is as Katz calls it, is very easy to understand. So you can just believe that if I go through that procedure, lo and behold, I get this algebra, and for which I understand in a different way anyway. That's another approach to take. Okay, that's what I meant when I was said that. I mean, I wish somebody had told me that I could just go to chapter 7 of Katz directly rather than read the first 6 chapters. Okay, this is what this is the advantage. That there is this concrete realization which is much more accessible and friendly than the. I mean, of course, it's very nice if you understand the theory, the general theory. But even if you don't, this is quite useful. Okay, so where were we? So let me write down the extended Cartan matrix now. So let's do it for the type AL, and the other types are done similarly. Yes.
Why is it always negative of highest root 1?
See, because this is the concrete realization. I mean, somehow particularly the concrete constructions are somehow you have to know what to do. They are not, seem to be no, I mean, you do it with some kind of feeling and intuition rather than worrying about some theory or what it should be. And then of course finally you prove that that must be the unique thing that is produced in some general fashion, but I don't know is the easy answer. You could ask, maybe when Vishwanath talks he can say more about that, why this particular thing, I don't know. But you will see that you will see why minus theta is a beautiful thing to do. I'll just do it in a minute. You will see why at least from one point of view it's producing something nice. Just in a minute you will see that. Okay, so what is the extended Dynkin diagram? Extended Cartan matrix. So extended Cartan matrix. So extended Cartan matrix AL1, that's the notation. The 1 on top denotes that it is extended. Okay. So what you do is, so there is L things here, you take one more thing, so it should be an L plus 1 plus times L plus 1 matrix. And this piece here is just like the underlying Cartan matrix, which is 2, 2, 2 along the diagonal, and then minus 1, zeros here, then minus 1, zeros here, and you know how that goes, right? That's how that matrix looks. Okay. For this last one, also let me put a 2 here and write the inner products. Okay. I have to do the correct thing, but in this case it's easy because the root lengths are all the same. So there is, what is it attached to? It is attached to this one as well as to the first one. So I'll see a minus 1 here and a minus 1 here, and the rest are zeros. Okay. Now, what should be the rank of this matrix? L, because this is of rank L, and the extra thing that I am adding is in the linear combination of these. It's after all a linear combination of these. So I am taking inner products with it's some, I mean, that not exactly similar, but you get the idea why it should be rank M. Okay. In this case, yes. In this case, yes, correct.
L by L.
Yes, exactly. So if you take, I'll just make this comment now, which relates to an important thing. So if theta is equal to C1 alpha 1 plus CL alpha L, and this was alpha 1, if somehow this was alpha 1 alpha L, then notice that this matrix, call it, I'll call it AAL1, okay, also for the matrix, okay, times C1 CL1 equals 0. Okay. So this has the property that it is killing an element, a totally positive vector. Okay. And in in an earlier chapter of cards, there is a classification of matrices. Okay. And these I now forget the exact result, but among them, which are would rank one less and have this property that they kill a certain and they are positive semi-definite. Is that correct, Vishwanath? Positive semi-definite. Yeah. And they kill a positive vector. They are very special. Okay, and that is the reason. That's one of the reasons why you chose that minus theta. Okay, because this will become a totally positive vector that is killed by the matrix. Okay.
Without such a theta, so that this is good.
If I take theta like that, then this is 0. See, no, sorry, or right. I mean, is the if bothering you? I am saying write theta equal to this. That's what we have written. Okay, that there I wrote a general root, but if theta is the highest root, write these coefficients, then this is 0 is what I am saying. Pardon me? In this case, CLs are all 1 because epsilon 1 minus epsilon n is nothing but the sum of epsilon, the sum of those. Okay, in this case it is 1, but it need not be. For example, let me just write for you B31. So the matrix B31. So there is two, so the original matrix, and this is related to which way do I write 1 and 2? Here I write minus 2 and here is minus 1. That's the original matrix. Now I write it 2 here and I erase the B. It gets attached to the second one. So here that's the matrix. Okay. So I repeat, you follow the procedure of what Sripath did this morning and what Punita is going to do tomorrow and day after, later this week, with these matrices. Instead of a general, in the Cartan matrix, and then you will get you will get as answer the twisted affine Lie algebra. Okay. Now let us come to the concrete description. So I am back to the concrete description. Now I said that it was the universal central extension of the Lie algebra of polynomial maps. I made that some long statement. So let us get a clarity on that now. Okay. So I am now going to produce, I gave you some example of a 2 co-cycle on Laurent polynomial ring itself, namely residue of P times the bilinear, it's a bilinear form which acted on P comma Q is residue of dP by dt times Q. That was the definition. Now we will give an example of a co-cycle on the Lie algebra of polynomial maps, which is nothing but G dot tensor CTT inverse. Okay, so that's what we are doing. So okay, so what I do is I fix so 2 co-cycle on L G naught. This is what I want to produce. So, and I will explain to you how, given a 2 co-cycle, you can produce a central extension. In fact, it is 2 ways. given a central extension, or one-dimensional central extension, you will get a 2 co-cycle, and if given a 2 co-cycle, you will get a one-dimensional central extension, and moreover, this central extension will be trivial if and only if this 2 co-cycle is a co-boundary. So it connects up perfectly with cohomology theory in the sense that the second cohomology group can be identified with the central extensions. So I have to produce this. So I fix a non-degenerate form. Invariant. So do we know such a form? Killing form. How many more do you know? Everything else is a scalar multiple. That was an exercise, homework exercise. That is, it follows from Schur's lemma. Okay, there is only one. Okay, up to so this exists and is unique up to scalar. That's because I'm assuming G is simple. So if you just assume semi-simple, it won't work. You can scale it differently on different components. Okay, so this is simple. So let's emphasize that this is simple. Okay, and the scaling will be important. I will scale it in a particular way that will make things work, but at the moment let's not worry about it. Just it's some invariant form, it's some multiple of the killing form. That's what it is. Okay, now I'll set psi of A B, and let me write residue of by the same formula, where A and B are now in this so you might ask, what is sorry. Okay, I have to extend the form. So, sorry, I'm not doing this. I didn't write this correctly. So let me. So let me do this differently. So I'll just do it on basis vectors. So how do basis vectors here look like? What is this? Recall that this is G dot tensor CTT inverse. Okay, and the basis vectors here are powers of t. Okay, so any element here I can write as xtm and sum it over as x varies in G naught. I can that's a so it's enough to worry about such an element. I take another element, and by bilinearity it's enough to worry about this. So I define this to be, see, I want it to be a 2-core cycle, which means it has to be antisymmetric somehow. So this has to play a role because otherwise, I mean, at least because I wrote it here. Okay, somehow I have to cook it up from here. Okay, so what should you write here? Well, so I am saying of course it's not easy, it may not be easy to guess, but at least it will be, the reason I am saying this is whatever I am going to write is motivated by the need that this should be antisymmetric. Okay, so notice what I write. I will write M here, okay, but it should be antisymmetric. So I'll write delta m plus n comma 0. That's what I'll write. So what it means is the following. See, what do I have here? I have a form on G, on the underlying G naught. I want to somehow extend it, cook up that's a bilinear form which is non-degenerate and invariant. I want to cook up a antisymmetric form on this. So what I say is, so along with the Lie algebra element there will be a power of t. I say that if this belongs to, the powers of t are not negative of each other, it is 0. And if it is negative of each other, then if this is 2 and this is minus 2, I will write 2 times xy, right? And why do I write 2 times? Because if I write this here, it should be negative of that. So it should be minus 2. So the need for this is that it should be antisymmetric, the form, because I want to produce a 2 cocycle out of it. Okay? And now you check that that is a 2 cocycle. What I've written, so check. It is antisymmetric, which we have just seen, and I will write down the other condition for something to be a 2 cocycle, namely it's what I said earlier in the lecture, that is if I take A, B, C plus B, C, A plus it has this property. Okay, and when you have a cocycle, 2 cocycle, now, okay, so now that completes the discussion of 2 cocycles, what they are and what is this particular one that I have produced. Okay, now what I will do is I will use this 2 cocycle to construct, yeah.
The Lie algebra function that takes the product is just this multiplied by that.
It's just extension by scalars. So the Lie algebra, let's write it down explicitly here. Again, by linearity, it is enough for me to say what this is. Indeed, that's, yeah. So central extensions from central extension associated to a 2 cocycle. So given a Lie algebra and given a 2 cocycle, how do I produce corresponding central extension? That's the question. So what I do is, let me do this in this particular case, but this works for any Lie algebra and any 2 cocycle. Okay, so in our case we have our L so I take one more element as a vector space. This is as a vector space. And this is extra element. So I take my original algebra, add 1 dimension to it, make it a bigger vector space by 1 dimension. This will be, I will put a Lie algebra structure on this, which will be my one-dimensional central extension. And the reason why this is called a one-dimensional central extension is the following. What I'll have an exact sequence like this. I'll have a Lie algebra. This will be a homomorphism. There will be a homomorphism like this, and this will be an onto map, so you can write like that. And here there will be Ck, this one-dimensional thing, and this will be central. In the sense that to define the Lie algebra multiplication here, I have to define multiplications between elements here. If I take something from here, and of course this with itself is 0 by the Lie algebra axioms, this with anything is 0. This with this, I mean this with this is 0. That's what it means. So this is a central ideal in this Lie algebra, and you have this. And so all I have to tell you now is how two elements multiply here. Okay. Now two elements multiply here to give me one element here in this vector space plus this. Now if this is going to be a homomorphism, then I know what this element is going to be. The multiplication on this part is just going to be as if the multiplication happens here. The only question is, I can add on some multiple of k. If you look at what that multiple of k should be, well, you can't add an arbitrary multiple of, if you look at that function and if you see what that function should satisfy in order that Jacobi identity is satisfied, you will see that that has to satisfy this property. That's the point of this Tooku cycle. Okay. So what you do is you define the multiplication here, Lie bracket. Is the following. Again, I'll define it only like this: xtm ytn. I have to define what that is. Okay, I'll use the same notation for elements here as well as here. So you know, by abuse of notation, this should be whatever the multiplication is here, which was like that, plus some k term. What should that be? That should be this cocycle, which was m times xy times delta m plus n comma 0 times k. Okay. I repeat, the point of all this cocycle business is, if I try to make this definition, then you would want that this is a Lie algebra multiplication. If you go back and try to check what this function must satisfy in order that that is a Lie algebra multiplication, you will come up with exactly the cocycle condition. Okay, that's the point. Okay, so now, be that as it may, we have the answer to the following question. Remember, I wrote down that, so if this was my untwisted affine, then its derived algebra is the universal central extension of the loop algebra. So now I can explain what all the terms in this mean. The loop algebra is nothing but the name given to this. Okay. This let us call by the notation L tilde G naught. Right. This is central. The moment I say it is central, when anything is 0. That's. And what is this universal central extension? Well, this whole thing is L tilde G naught. Now, what has not been explained, we have constructed this as a central extension of the loop algebra. What has not been explained is why is it universal? What is the meaning of that universal? But for the moment, let's ignore that. It is universal in some good sense, but never mind. It's just take it as we'll not worry about it. Okay, but we've come this far. Okay, we know what the derived algebra of the untwisted affine algebra is. I have to now tell you what the affine algebra itself is. Okay, so let me do that now. Okay, maybe some kind of philosophical explanation. I don't know if this is correct, maybe it's completely wrong to say this, but let me say it anyway. So you add, to get G, which is denoted L hat G naught. So there are three steps if you wish. There is the L of G naught, which is the loop algebra. There is the L tilde of G naught, which is the central extension of the loop algebra. And then there is an L hat of G naught, which is the corresponding untwisted affine algebra. Okay. Now you add one more element. Okay. The reason for that, somehow philosophically at least, is the following. So you started off with a nice positive definite matrix. Then you added one, you made it slightly bigger, and now it has become singular. Okay. Now, and I think this part Punita will do it more very correctly in great generality. Somehow you want to add one more extra row and column so that it becomes this singular thing is embedded as part of a bigger non-singular matrix. In this case you can do it by just adding one more column and row. Okay, that's the reason why you sort of manage with just one more element. That's sort of the philosophical reason why there is one additional element here. Okay, and that's a nice element too. So this is the so
You're talking about this K.
No, K you've added. So now we have added. Now we are here. We've added K and gotten here. That's still for that. I'm going to add. I'm saying now I'm going to add one more element or one more dimension, and to get to L tilde G. To get to G, which the notation for that is also L hat G naught. Okay.
So far, everything's been sort of unique given G circle.
So all this given G circle, G dot, I can construct this uniquely. There is no problem. Now, in what sense is it? I mean, it is a particular construction, as it says, concrete construction of some abstractly defined and unique in some very abstract way, but this is a concrete construction. Okay, so I add one more element, and how do I add it? It's very simple. So recall, and I guess semi-direct products of Lie algebras have not been talked about, but they work just like semi-direct products of groups. Okay, so when can you form a semi-direct product of two groups? When one group acts on by automorphisms. Okay, so if a group G acts on a group N by automorphisms, then you form the semi-direct product of G and N, with N as the normal subgroup, G as the G cross N will be the wholes as a set. It will be G cross N, and there will be a product. Okay, so now you tell me by analogy, when can you construct a semi-direct product of Lie algebras? When one Lie algebra acts on another by derivations. Okay, so when one Lie algebra acts on another Lie algebra by derivations, you can form the semi-direct product the same way. Okay, do this as an exercise. Okay, so I say semi-direct products of Lie algebras. Take the semi-direct product definition of groups acting by automorphism, one group acting on automorphism another group. Just similarly do it. So exercise. Okay. So you want one Lie algebra acting on another by derivations. Okay, now, so I have my Lie algebra. This is the Lie algebra I have. I want to extend it by one more dimension. So I take a one-dimensional Lie algebra. If I take a one-dimensional Lie algebra, I am relieved of telling you what the product is, because there can only be one product. Okay, so I take the one-dimensional Lie algebra. I want to let it act by derivations on this. Okay, which means I just tell you how that one element acts. Okay, and there is a natural choice of a derivation, I claim, because there is a gradation. When there is a gradation, so if you have an algebra, here is another basic observation, and this appears again and again. If you have an algebra which is graded, I'm speaking vaguely, you might think that I'm speaking vaguely, but I'm allowed to do it because it works in great generality. Okay, what is an algebra? An algebra is some vector space along with some multiplication. What does it mean to have a gradation? When there is some, say, norm, typically the integers, this vector space is a direct sum over subspaces indexed by the integers, and furthermore you have the property that if you take Vn times the product Vm, whatever this product might be, is contained in Vn plus n. Right? Now notice the following. If I define a linear operator on this vector space such that the nth piece is an eigenspace with eigenvalue n, that's a derivation. It's called the degree derivation. This is a trivial calculation, but it's a very basic observation. It's called the degree derivation. So observe that this is graded with xtm has degree m graded by z, by the integers. Xtm has degree m and k has degree 0. So you can check that this Lie algebra is graded in this sense very easily. Okay, it has a natural derivation, therefore, namely the degree derivation. I take this Lie algebra, take the semi-direct product with the one-dimensional Lie algebra generated by, so degree derivation, call it d. So d acting on Vn, so d on of Vn is n times Vn. That's the definition of the degree derivation. Okay, so I can form this by now equal to Cd.
You mean this derivation doesn't map Vn to Vn minus 1?
No, it doesn't map me into one. It is, okay, if you are worried about this, it is not d by dt but td by dt. Okay, so Cd, semi-direct product notation, L tilde G naught, and we have completed the concrete construction of the untwisted affine Lie algebra.
So, isn't this still finite dimensional, or it's infinite dimensional over C?
Over C it is infinite dimensional, because already you see that there is a Laurent polynomial ring there. Yeah. So it is infinite dimensional over complex numbers. Yeah. Okay, many of these are, that is a typical thing that you see, is many of the things that you see are finite dimensional over some polynomial ring or some other bigger rings, and so no, but over the underlying vector field, the complex numbers, it's infinite dimensional. Okay, so now we can go on and I can tell you what the Cartan subalgebra is. Now we will not worry about the general, what a Cartan subalgebra might mean in general, maximal toral subalgebra, etc. We will not worry about that. We will just write down something and call that the Cartan subalgebra, and then observe that there is an eigenspace decomposition, call it the root space decomposition. The eigenvalues will be called roots. You will see that there are positive roots and negative roots, and there will be a while group, and then you can play around in the same way that you did earlier. Okay, that's the idea. I think it's been a long day, so I will save this for another day. We will stop here. Okay, so thank you.